That's where we got to go now to bring in former NFL coach and new head coach at Grambling State University, Hue Jackson. And Hue, I want to dive right into this because as someone whose parents and siblings are graduates of HBCUs, I'm excited about what your presence at Grambling means for the school, for the SWAC, and for HBCUs as a whole when it comes to the landscape of college football. So what about this job made it right for you in this time and space?
First of all, Canty and Golic Jr., thank you for having me on. Obviously, it was just, when you think back to the HBCUs, Grambling has always been the King Kong of the HBCUs. And obviously, Eddie Robinson, what he did at Grambling, one of the greatest coaches in the history of football, to have a chance to go there and lead a program like Grambling with President Gallo and Dr. Scott, who's our AD, boy, to me, it was just a tremendous opportunity.
Hugh, obviously, so much of the conversation this year has been about the success that Deion Sanders has had at Jackson State. Did seeing any of that kind of stoke your interest in this?
Oh, absolutely. To me, being at Tennessee State probably was the eye-opener for me about what HBCU football was. I mean, obviously, that was a great season for Tennessee State. We had a 4-game run in there, but we played against Jackson State. And I got to see firsthand what Deion's doing over there, and he's doing an outstanding job. Obviously, they got a big game tomorrow in the Celebration Bowl, and I wish them well. But it gave me just a taste of what it could be like, just the pageantry, the bands, the football teams, and there was some great football being played.
And Hugh, you mentioned the Celebration Bowl, and they're expecting a record crowd, a sellout, first time in that event's history. It's going to be 75,000 people there. They're actually issuing standing room only tickets in that game between the SWAC and the MEAC champions. And so I wanted to ask you, what does that say about the state of HBCU football and how it's valued now?
I think the value is definitely going up. You know, I think obviously what Deion's done, he's really opened everybody's eyes as to what can be done in HBCU football. Eddie George being at Tennessee State was another eye-opener. Hopefully I can do my part over at Grambling, which I will do my part, to make sure that we get more eyes on what's happening with these HBCUs universities, that there are some really good football teams and some really good football players, and now there's some really good coaches, not that there haven't been in the past. But I think the coaches have done a really good job of elevating and showing the talent and showcasing the talent that's in these particular conferences.
Canty and Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio talking to Grambling State head football coach Hue Jackson on the Goodyear Hotline. And Hugh, one of the other things we saw, that, I mean, a major commitment, 5-star talent now heading to play for Deion. Is that something you think can become more common now, especially with all of the different changes around player agency in college football?
Yes, I do. I truly believe that it can. I mean, the rules and the landscape is starting to change. I mean, I think HBCUs are where to go to have that opportunity to showcase your talent and ability and still have the same experience as you would any place else. And obviously what Deion did with the young man, Mr. Hunter, coming out of his high school, just says now the eyes are starting to look everywhere, that these players want an opportunity to play and want an opportunity to showcase their talent and ability.
Coach, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about what's going on in the National Football League right now. Just today, the NFL announced that they were postponing 3 games that were scheduled to go off in Week 15 between Saturday and Sunday into next week. And as somebody that wore the hat of an NFL head coach, how do you manage the game week being adjusted the way that some of these coaches are going to have to when it comes to the impact of COVID-19 on what their schedule is going to be for the next couple of days?
Boy, it's really tough because you really don't have any control on what could happen the next morning, let alone get to game day. You don't know what team you could be coaching, or you as the coach could be coaching the team. So I think it's hard, but at the same time, everybody's playing with the same rules. And so the teams that figure it out, that understand how to make sure that their team stays as safe as they can, they're going to be the teams that have a chance to be successful. But this is an unprecedented week from what I've heard, that there's more players than ever before that are going to be out for this particular week.
Hugh, to that end, the competitive standpoint that you mentioned there in the way that teams deal with this, do you think the NFL was making the right decision by postponing these games? There's been a lot of players and others that have pointed out that now they believe it puts the teams that did make sure their players stayed healthy, did not get the virus at a competitive disadvantage.
Well, I think you said it. People don't want to be penalized for doing the right thing. I think the teams that handled their meetings, that handled their practice, that handled everything within their building right, they should not be penalized because another team didn't. Some people are not going to handle it right, and I think the teams that did, they should not be penalized for it.
Coach, I want to ask you about your former quarterback and Cleveland Browns' current quarterback, Baker Mayfield. He's been very vocal about some things. There's been some internal friction between him and head coach Kevin Stefanski. There have been some incidents where he stepped away from the podium and his media obligations. There have been some words on social media. So just your overall thoughts on where he's at in terms of his development, his maturation, and his standing with that organization.
Well, obviously, it's hard for me to comment on that because I'm not there. But I do understand, again, Baker's a very competitive young man, and he wants to win, and he wants to do everything he can to put his team in the best situation. Obviously, Coach Stefanski, who was the coach of the year last year, had a great year. And obviously, you got to find a way to keep those relationships strong. I think those two men, I think they're very good men. I mean, obviously, Kevin Stefanski is sensational. So him and Baker's got to find a way to mend these rifts because they're right in the chase of making it to the playoffs. Okay, so to me, I always get concerned when things start leaking out of buildings right now. That means, like you said, where there's smoke, there's smoke. So they got to figure this out because they're right in the middle of a playoff chase, and they got a chance to salvage this here at the end.
Hue Jackson with us on the Goodyear Hotline here on Canty and Golic Jr. Coach, you coached Baker when he first got into the league. So what is the key to connecting with him as a player, and where do you think he needs to develop most as a player still based on where you saw him and got to work with him in the beginning?
Well, I think Baker is I think he has improved. I think people don't see it. Obviously, I think he's dealt with injuries this year, and obviously he's fought through some things. But at the same time, I think coaching and players have to work together. I'll say that as often as I can because I think that's where it starts. Those relationships are so important to get you through the week, to get you to game day in order to have a chance to be successful. Obviously, Baker's their quarterback, and he's their starter, and he's their starter for a reason. We drafted him #1 overall for a reason, and Coach Stefanski's the coach. So they got to find a way to continue to get him to grow, and then the coach has to, within his personality, to make sure that he's giving the quarterback what he needs to be successful.
Well, Coach, certainly that's going to be the challenge for the Cleveland Browns and for Baker Mayfield. And for you now in Grambling State, the challenge is to go out there and to continue to build on that legacy that you talked about in that program. So best of luck, Coach. We really appreciate you giving us some of your time today, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again down the road.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.